microphones, and we're ready to go. Thank you everyone for your patience. This is Max, your moderator, and today we're going to have a debate between Jovan Bradley defending socialism and 1stAmender defending capitalism. For you, those of you who don't know, MDD is a neutral platform where we hold debates on religion, politics, and science. We are present on Discord as well as YouTube, where you can find us on Modern Day Debate on YouTube. If you want to join, the registration for the server is open, and you can definitely find someone to have a debate with over 5,500 users. The Modern Day Debate Discord is a platform that hasn't stopped growing for a very long time. So today we have Jovan Bradley and 1stAmender. Who of you is going to go first?
Well, I'm on the affirmative of capitalism, and he's on the affirmative of socialism. I suppose it would be a good idea maybe if we flipped a coin.
I'd be fine with flipping a coin.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and pull up
Okay, hold on. Yeah, I can go get a coin.
Oh, you got a coin?
Just...
All right, cool. You do it, Max. I was going to pull up something on my screen. No problem.
Right, let me put my webcam, my big one. Okay, there we go. So we have the 10 peso Uruguayan coin. You have Jaguar or our coat of arms. As Jovan is our guest and you're a local, let's give Jovan the choice. Coat of arms or Jaguar?
Let's go Jaguar.
Jaguar, let's go. And it's coat of arms, right? So 1stAmender, you will take the first 5 minutes. Let me put the timer back on. All right, there we go. So 5 minutes on the clock. You can see the timer, correct?
Yes.
I can, yeah.
All right. So as soon as you start speaking, I'll hit the go on the timer.
All right. Well, greetings, everybody. I am 1stAmender, and I'm here to argue in favor of capitalism. I'm a new YouTuber, and I love to argue with people. And if you like to hear me argue with people, you should subscribe to me on YouTube. Now, onto my intro. In defining my terms for the subject, I offer three simple distinctions. Capitalism is the private ownership of the means of production. Communism is the classless, moneyless, stateless society. And socialism is the workers' ownership of the means of production. There are many who make arguments that move to the system into socialism and stay there instead. I do not think that Jovan is in fact one of them. Or come up with another argument for the woes of capitalism as a necessity for changing the entirety of society. While I would agree that there would be an overall change in the system, is likely going to be inevitable, and that there is going to be genuine issues under capitalism, I do not believe socialism is the solution to this problem. I am also arriving at the conclusion that socialism was attempted to its fullest extent, though, resulting in a state capitalist models that ultimately having the workers owning the means of production, requiring severing the private ownership by the bourgeoisie required a giant state apparatus to transfer it. Because of this apparatus effectively becomes a state capitalist system inherently due to having it make the transference a reality. Transferring the ownership of the means of production ultimately becomes impossible without making strict authoritarian system that removes people's ability to make the things that they desire, and it destroys fundamental macroeconomic principles for a worse-off outcome, such as the need to innovate, the invisible hand, the self-interested individual, and more. The only reason why we care about one economic model over another is ultimately whether or not it fulfills people more or less based on the fact that we live in a finite society where objects must move from point A to point B in a Euclidean sense. Given that we inherently have this objective limitation from person to person, what is the most efficient system can actually satisfy the desires of man to the fullest extent? When we observe socialist societies, or rather other societies where socialism was attempted, even when left alone to its own devices, as in not stopped by any capitalist country like the United States, often results in far worse outcomes than any capitalist countries. The socialists will tell you that this is because the United States intervened in the socialist countries, and I would argue against this on two separate points. Number one, not all socialist countries were intervened by the United States. When we look at some models and attempts at pushing socialism into communism, China was left alone through its own devices, completely unimpeded by the United States, even up to the 1970s through the atrocities of Mao Zedong. Yet the socialists wouldn't claim this, as it ultimately was an authoritarian system that was antithetical to the ideas of communism being classless. Yet I posit to you, this is incorrect, given that something must transfer the ownership of the means of production from the private ruling class to the working class, which ultimately leads into the giant state apparatus that is antithetical to the lack of class, because those who control it ultimately lead to a class society that is far, far worse than capitalism, that is good from taking goods from point A to point B that must satisfy the people, yet the goods flowing from point A to point B end up as a trickle in comparison to the ridiculous proportions of the selection of plenty in capitalist systems. Number two, socialism is incompatible with everyone. Given that you must purge the bourgeoisie out of their wealth to transfer it to the workers, it effectively becomes antithetical to existence itself. Even if we are to assume that everything was tyrannical in the kings of the past, as the socialists compare, if there exists this ruling class, indeed they are quite ruling, and the satiated population isn't interested in uprooting their lives, realizing that they find themselves up against an enemy that wished to, quote, consume them, sometimes quite literally, quote, eat the rich, unquote. As they will tell you, if there are predications of the socialists to eat the rich, then indeed the ruling class would find a vested interest in physically stopping socialism where it springs up, for their very existence is at stake. Indeed, what difference is it if the lion thrashes when bit by hyenas? Did the lion not attack the hyenas in defense? There is no different from the way that capitalism fights back against socialism should they desire to, quote, not be eaten. Then certainly that there is a vested interest in removing power, aka trade wars, that substantially reduce their power and foothold over societies and encourage trade in countries that keep the ruling class available. Because socialism is ultimately hostile to all nations around it, and given that socialism results in worse outcomes for the many, and that it has been tried in over 57 countries and failed in every single one, save for perhaps Vietnam, Cuba, and Venezuela, though I doubt I would consider any of these to be a success when compared to any modern capitalist nation, I posit that the 20th century has happened, and that capitalism in combination with social safety nets is by far the best system we currently have. But assuming a material dialectic, I could easily argue a technocratic oligarchy where people don't have to work much due to extreme automation, but that would be an entirely different discussion. In short, socialism bad, capitalism good, but let's hear out our interlocutor in this argument.
All right. For those of you in the audience, if you have questions for both of our debaters, you can tag at MDD stage questions and the bot, and we will go over those questions at the end of the open discussion. So, Jovan, 5 minutes on the clock. When you start speaking, I will start the timer.
Yeah, so I like to also define these terms very specifically before a debate. So I pretty much vibe with First Amender's definitions. Capitalism, I would say, is an economic system based on the private ownership of the means of production and their operation for profit, while socialism is an economic system in which the means of production and exchange are collectively owned by the working class. I like to distinct what those means of production are. These would be land, labor, capital, and tools and technology. So these five things would be just a basis of the means of production. I am not somebody who's looking to keep the interim socialism. I would more accurately define myself as a council communist, where I'm looking for the workers to have immediate democratic control over basically every aspect of our lives. The workers being the 99% of people who would determine everything for the 100%. The distinction of capitalism or of socialism to remove the bourgeoisie to fold into the proletariat would then mean that everybody gets a say, not just some people, because the bourgeoisie would become proletariat under a socialist system. I do think that capitalism is currently the broken and flawed system. We can talk about all we want about socialist countries that have failed. Capitalism is currently failing. It's currently failing multiple people. 63% of all new wealth generated in the world went to 1% of the population. 14 million Americans are in medical debt. 30 million are uninsured. 40 million are underinsured. 44% of of all single family homes were bought up by private equity firms where they can raise the rent exuberantly and sort of oust out poor families from their homes or from the communities that they live in. 1 in 5 children go to bed without food every night. 17 million households experience food insecurity. 63% of American workers can't afford a $500 emergency expense. There are 600,000 houseless people and 16 million unoccupied homes. It's very clear that the system of capitalism is failing. And I don't believe that the system will correct itself even with enough social safety nets. I believe what will always happen under a capitalist system is that crony capitalism or corporatism will always end up making its way through the belly of the beast. Basically, we're always going to see a world where corporations are able to influence policy, and I believe this to be a negative. I believe socialism will lead the country and therefore the rest of the world to more economic equality, more worker empowerment, a better social welfare system, and it'll address the ethical concerns that I have with capitalism, which primarily boil down to exploitation of the worker, as well as issues with environmental capitalism and how capitalism is slowly killing the planet. When I talk about socialism, I don't really care about whether it has or has not worked previously, but we will address that in like the back and forth. I really care about like what system provides the tools necessary for social welfare, right? I don't see this happening in capitalism anywhere unless you are in the top echelon of people, right? We can talk all day and long that American capitalism is working, but American capitalism is affecting the global South in just terrible ways. The average median income in the world is $3,000. That's the average median income. And there's almost nowhere in the world where that's going to see prosperity. I think when we look at whether socialist systems have been successful, we tend to look at these via capitalist means. We look at the metrics of capitalism to determine whether socialism is working. I disagree with this as well on like a fundamental basis. I believe that if we look at sort of actual quality of life metrics in places where we don't see interference, we are going to see that these quality of life metrics outpace the US and outpace almost every capitalist country. So this would be things like the fact that Cuba has a 100% literacy rate, or that Cuba has a higher life expectancy than the US, or lower infant mortality. Just metrics like this, when we analyze actual quality of life metrics, they tend to be better than in capitalist countries. So again, long story short, capitalism bad, socialism will be a way to lead to more equitable systems. 30 seconds left, but that's it for me.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to go into the back and forth. I will remind you, everyone in the audience down there, if you want to ask a question to any of the debaters, tag the bot at MDD stage questions and ask your question. Also include who the question is for, and we will get into that after the open discussion. So let me reset the timer, 50. There we go. And just so you know, if you're during the discussion, you're going to call a fallacy, as a moderator, I will hold you to explain the fallacy that you called out. So please, let's try to keep it civil, respectful, try to keep the interruptions to a minimum, and we will start the open discussion. Take it away.
So Jovan, I got a question for you.
Yeah, sure.
You want it to, you said 100%. 100% what? Communism?
I'm a council communist, so I would like it to eventually move from a socialist system to a council communist system.
What is a council communist system?
Yeah, so council communism is basically communism that focuses on worker control. So it's going to be let me just pull it up because I don't want to get it wrong. Worker control. So the core principles of council communism is that workers should directly manage their workplaces and the broader economy through councils. Direct democracy. So it's going to advocate that the workers have a direct say. So one vote, one say, unless they vote in like a chair, which is usually okay as long as there's enough ways for the chair to be unvoted basically. Anti-statism, so it does not want to see a transitional state control. Although I don't necessarily know that it won't that will be possible, but that's what council communism pushes for. And then like no political parties of any kind.
Okay. What if I want to own a private company?
Democracy system.
What if I want?
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to do that.
Okay, so we currently have companies that are privately owned. So what would you do in a situation like that where it's like you have to transition? How do you do that?
Yeah, all the private owned companies would be given over to the workers who work at those companies.
I'm saying, how would you do that?
Number of different ways, just depends on what the people want to see. I mean, we can do it where everything becomes a worker-owned co-op. We can do it where it becomes more like
but
like a typical
I'm a private
union
business
fashion.
owner.
Yep.
I don't want to give it away. It's been in my family for 150 years. I don't want to. Okay, you just take it. All right, cool.
Yes.
So like, I have a really hard time with that idea because like I believe that people have a right to their own private property, which would include personal and private property.
I go with the traditional Marxist sense where the only private property we're talking about is the private property of the bourgeoisie. So we're talking about the private property that would control those means of production. So anything that is commodified for like commodified resource needed for living, and then those means of production that I stated: land, labor, capital, tools, and technology.
So societies, they get better when that country has a government that respects right to private property. This is in fact the case, and it can be observed in the Human Development Index. In fact, it's one of the positive metrics in the Human Development Index. So I'm asking you, like, if we look at the countries that are like the highest quality of living today, they all have private property respect, which includes businesses, which includes homes, which includes landlords, and includes all those things. So I'm asking you want to divest that so that way it goes to the workers by force, if necessary.
Yeah, so I would disagree with this notion that like the countries that are doing well are because of like capitalism, especially when we see that these countries, even when you look at the Human Development Index, like the countries that they list as the countries that are the most developed have gotten that way by the exploitation of resource theft from the global South. So like in order for a capitalist country to maintain its foothold and to maintain the fact that capitalism is an ever expanding economic system that needs to consistently grow for a profit model, right? The only way to do this is by stealing resources, stealing labor from the global South. It's the only way it's ever been able to do it. We see this in the destruction of Latin America. We see this in the destruction of Africa. We can see this globally, like that countries like the US, countries like England, places like these have decimated. So I would just reject this notion. I'd say the only way, I don't really care if like one country is doing well. I want to look at the big global picture. And if one country can only do well by destroying another, I don't think that country is actually doing well.
But globally, the world has gotten richer. The quality of life has improved globally.
Sure. If I have a plate full of shit and I take 25% of the shit off the plate, I still have a plate full of shit.
Okay, but you're arguing for taking... You're arguing for taking that plate of shit and making it into more shit, is what I'm saying.
I would
because
disagree
you got
that.
You have the highest quality of living societies, and you're saying that they have to divest the private ownership by the Human Development Index.
Yeah, but by what? The Human Development Index, like when they're looking at quality of life, what are they looking at when they're measuring quality of life?
There's
like
a bunch of things that they look
at. Because we can look at healthcare. The US is nowhere near we're number 11 in healthcare from all developed nations. I wouldn't say that's a high quality of life when again we have people dying of being uninsured and they have to like go to what is it? GoFundMe in order to pay for medical expenses. We can look at even when the HDI dimensions is long and healthy life, knowledge, and a decent standard of living, which I would argue that like America is not number one in any of these, and most highly developed capitalist countries are only going to be number one again because they're destroying other countries to do that.
Okay, you're going all sorts of, you brought up like 3 or 4 different topics, and I can talk about each one, but I really want to kind of break this down, right? You keep bringing up that they have destroyed the third world, right? I don't disagree with you.
I didn't say the third world. Global South.
The global South. That's fine. They've destroyed the global South, but I'm saying that globally it's gotten richer. And then the second thing that I'm pointing out is the ones that have the highest quality of living societies are ones that respect the right of private property, which includes personal and private property, right? Like the land as well as personal property. And in terms of like the HDI is just basically measuring how long your life is, measured like life expectancy is at birth. Knowledge is measured by mean years of schooling and expected years of schooling, as well as a standard of living, which is measured through GNI per capita in PPP terms using US dollars. So there's our HDI. And then we look at the countries that have a very high HDI. Indeed, the quality of living is very high. I don't see these socialist countries being quite well. Now, I agree with you. There's probably like trade barriers and stuff that makes it worse for them. Yes, I agree. But there are unimpeded countries that did make it a lot worse. So I'm asking you, why do you want to divest the ownership of the means of production to the working class if it literally makes the world worse?
Yeah, I feel like I kind of addressed this, and you partially agreed with me on the addressal here. You said you said you agree that capitalism has decimated the global South. Now, even if the global South is getting better, it's still being decimated, right? And I don't know how much I'd argue that it's getting better, because the only time we see it better is when we sans and remove the capitalist interference, right? And even places like the Congo are not getting better. Places like Haiti are not getting better, right? So in that regard, I would say that this is still proving my point, right? You said that the HDI, these are the indicators. Well, long and healthy life. Again, Cuba has a higher life expectancy than the U.S.
I agree with you. Those are genuine problems with the United States, but that doesn't mean that you go ahead.
Hold on. It's not just the U.S., right? Hong Kong is number one in life expectancy, right? Number one. China is currently moving itself to a more nationwide socialist system, right? It's currently doing it. So I would disagree here that this claim that like the Human Development Index is going to show that capitalist countries are doing better is not entirely the case. And I feel like it's ahistoric to deny that these countries are doing well because of the way that they destroy other countries to maintain their quality of life. I think it's totally okay that there may even be a slight dip in quality of life if it means every country becomes even on the playing field, right? I know I don't see this happening because we have the technology to provide all of these resources for everybody. We just don't do it. We have the technology, we have the resources, we have the means to do it. We even have the infrastructure that we could realistically provide all of this stuff to people. We just don't. So I would just argue against that on those basic tenets.
You're going all over the place, and I'm trying to like break it down exactly what you're saying.
I literally answered the three things you said. That's not going all over the place.
Let's do one thing at a time then.
Sure. Well, then don't combat with three things.
So let's look at global wealth.
Sure.
It's gone up, right?
Sure.
Okay. You're saying that things have gotten worse because we have been raping the global South, right?
Correct.
But it's gotten wealthier.
Yeah, global wealth is going to be highly skewed by capitalist countries.
Okay, if we're taking it from the global South,
mm-hmm.
then it would serve to say that they would get poorer, right?
No, because they're still going to receive some benefit. Like it's not going to be 100% without exchange, because otherwise capitalists wouldn't be able to claim that they're not doing it. Right. So they do allow for some redistribution, but it's nowhere near enough, and it's nowhere near what these countries like earn and what they are owed because of the taking of their own resources. Global wealth, I just want to mention the global wealth thing is not a metric we use to determine success of socialism. We wouldn't use global wealth. Socialism is not a for-profit model.
Again, I mean, I brought up the Human Development Index that's based off of the World Health Organization. So you use the World Health Organization for valid statistics, and I would imagine the HDI would be a good metric to work off of. And what are the highest quality of living societies according to the HDI? What are we looking at?
It's mostly going to be societies that have had very little interference from other, or I won't say very little interference, but it's going to be countries that are like pretty higher capitalist countries.
I agree.
But when we look at the lower countries on the the HDI, it is countries that have been destroyed, like been quite literally colonized and destroyed.
I agree with you. I don't like the foreign policy of these countries, right? Like, I'm not in favor of like harming, worse off countries. That's fine. But you can't sit there and say that, if we just move over to socialism, all of a sudden the resource extraction thing is no longer a problem.
Why would it be?
What? Because you need to get resources. What is the quality of life that you have? Do you have an air conditioner?
Sure.
Do you have a refrigerator?
Sure.
Do you have a carpet?
Why wouldn't I have these things under a socialist system?
What?
Why would I not have these things under a socialist system?
I don't think you would. In fact, that's not the norm. The norm is not having those things. And in fact, to have all of those things, you have to basically extract resources from a poor country to have it happen.
This idea that the norm is to not have these things, like these countries that don't have them because their infrastructure has been decimated. Like, what do you mean? Countries where it's like predominantly mountainous regions, which are a lot of them in the global south, won't have easy access to electricity, right? This isn't an issue with like capitalism or socialism. They're highly mountainous regions that don't have easy access to this.
Yeah,
and
that's
haven't
what
been
I'm
able
saying.
to build the easy access, because even when they do receive a little bit of benefit, capitalism comes in and destroys it. So like, I don't know where we're getting this idea
that's what I'm saying. It's a point A, that things are finite on Earth. Things have to go from point A to point B in order for people to satisfy their life, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So under a socialist model, it doesn't matter if the workers own the company or if it's like the government making a decision or if it's private ownership, you still have the same problem.
No,
it doesn't change.
We have the resources and infrastructure to give these things to people. We have that.
Has the USSR ever left the countries in destitution?
What does this matter? I've said in my opening statement, I don't really care how these other socialist countries have survived, right? I think it's a bit of a red herring when I say here are the tenets I would go to, and instead of arguing against those tenets, we say, well, it didn't work over here, it didn't work over here. Okay, well, we know the failures of those systems. Hold on, so we know the failures of those systems. We know how those systems failed, right? So we can combat how those systems failed with enough foresight knowledge.
Yeah.
Right?
So let me give you a little bit of foresight knowledge here then, right? Let's think about some foresight knowledge. When you divest the ownership of the means of production from the private ruling class, internationally, investors run for the hills. Do you know why? Because their property will get well, wait, then now you have a problem. Now you have a problem with leverage. Now basic businesses no longer can actually operate properly.
How do you think
what's leverage?
Operation
Stop.
How do you think
What's
the
leverage?
operation What do you mean what's leverage? This is a non sequitur.
That is not a non sequitur. No. It's incredibly important.
I've said multiple times, you're analyzing socialist countries via capitalist metrics, like
Are you saying that there should be no money?
Like that. Yeah, there absolutely should be no money.
How the fuck does that work?
A business should only be as valuable as its value to the community.
How do you deal with the invisible hand?
How do you deal with the invisible hand?
Yeah, how do you deal with that?
What do you mean?
The invisible hand is like a Adam Smith idea.
Uh-huh.
Do you know what it is?
No, explain it to me.
So people have their own self-interest. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And when they have their own self-interest, they go get stuff with the self-interest, right? And as a result, the collection of people where they have their own self-interest trying to get things, that basically creates a demand. And when there is a demand, there are people that seek to make profit off of that in a selfish way. And so they seek to satisfy that demand, right?
Yes,
and so things just, I understand that. I'm saying, how do you deal with that? Right now, we don't actually have to manage the supply and demand of things from like a central model. It does it on its own. It doesn't require a single actor. It just requires it requires each individual acting at their own greedy selfishness, and that it actually outputs to something. So like when people want food, there's going to be a guy that's like, I can make a lot of money off of like supplying food. So I'm asking, how do you satisfy for that? You're just saying that it should be a central economy?
I don't think it's going to exist. I think, again, you're trying to say, how does socialism account for this thing that only exists in a free market system? Well, we are no longer going to have a free market system. This thing is not going to exist anymore.
Okay, but then now you have like, if you're used to like having a huge selection at like being able to just like buy stuff, then that's going to be under a capitalist model, given the current quality of living that you live. Okay, under a socialist system, you would have much less to choose from. Much less.
That matter?
It's not even close.
Matter? And
it's a lower quality of life. It makes things worse.
Hello,
that's ridiculous.
One at a time, please.
Yeah, I would just argue.
Going great, so.
Yeah, sure. I would say this is a ridiculous argument, right? You're saying that just selection means that we have a better quality of life, but where's that quality of life when the selections are essentially the same with very minute differences, right? I have a higher quality of life because I can buy essentially the same type of car from 6 different companies. Like, I have a higher quality of life because I can choose McDonald's, Burger King, or Wendy's that essentially make the same product. I would disagree with this fundamentally. What's going to provide a higher quality of life is that if the people that can't choose those things get to actually have the things that will allow them to live and to prosper.
That's just an argument of social safety nets. I can do that with social safety nets. I don't have to remove the entirety of the ownership. No, it has been done in many European countries and Canada. It's worked. It worked.
Yes, those countries
right?
Also
and we do,
South.
You know, and honestly, the reality is the reality is that like the only reason why that's an issue in the United States is because we have Republicans and they're like really dumb. That's it. That's literally
It's not just an issue. It's not just an issue with the U.S. Canada also decimates the global South. Norwegian state countries also decimate the global South. This idea that it's just America is not true. So again, all of these countries that are able to provide these quality of life and provide all of these resources are able to do so because of the theft of resources from other places. So cool. Maybe
except
Canada,
they're getting richer. Okay, let's say if I went to your house and I took your car. Let's say I stole it. Are you richer or are you poorer?
Poorer.
Poorer. Okay. We're stealing from the South, right?
Correct.
Are they richer or are they poorer?
They have more money now because they are outputting more.
How? So how does that work?
Because the more
we stole from them.
Even if you're getting pennies. So when I say steal, I obviously don't mean like everything is being taken like by force, right? They are getting compensated. They're getting very little compensation for the work they're putting out. And we're forcing them to work more and output more. So the compensation is going to grow, even though the compensation is not commensurate with the labor that they're putting in, which I'm sure you would agree with. Do you disagree that the global South is getting paid equitably for the labor that they're engaging in?
No, of course not. No.
Okay, no. So then this idea that just because they're making more is I don't think it's a good argument here, because they're just outputting more. Their output has risen 40% in the last, 3 or 4 years? So like, of course they're ending up with some more in the pocket, but that's because they're being forced to work more.
Well, again, that actually has more to do with like how there's like higher levels of productivity in the United States than almost any country. And when you observe that, I do agree with you that like the amount of productivity that's being done isn't akin to what is actually being outputted to what they're being paid. I would agree with that part. But like, again, like this is just a matter of like understanding how automation works and how like modernization of economies work. But you're arguing for divesting that so that way the workers could own the means of production. But I have zero empirical metric where that is in fact the case. So you want me to plunge head deep into quixoticism in favor of an ideology that I don't even know whether or not that it could work. Let me ask you this. Do you think...
do this all the time.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that if we're going to make a giant change to a system, do you think that we should know that it works?
No, I think we all the time have systems that are created without seeing direct examples of it. Like it takes.
What if it involves the entire economy? Do you think that we should check?
We've done this before.
We could use computer models.
We've physically done this before, right? When like the
Socialism?
U.S. Revolution, there was no real example of a constitutional republic like the U.S. became, and there was no real example of like national banking in the way that the U.S. started national banking in the 1700s, right? But we did it anyway, right? We like this idea that you need to like leading by example exists for a reason, right? I think this idea that you have that.
But socialism was tried, was it not?
I would disagree that the socialism I'm purporting was tried.
Did they not make an attempt?
The USSR didn't. The USSR
was an attempt made.
An attempt on socialism made, but this would be discounting the fact that there's multiple socialist systems. So just because one version of socialism has been tried does not mean that it's encountered every version of socialism.
But it was tried in 57 different countries in different flavors.
Yeah,
and it failed in all of them.
By the way,
it failed.
You made the claim. You made the claim in your opening statement that the U.S. there are countries that haven't been involved with via, I wouldn't say the U.S., but via capitalist interference. What country are you talking about?
China.
China was
left alone, entirely alone, pretty much for 30 or 40 years under Mao Zedong. It was completely the only instance where they actually did any amount of intervening was where there was negotiation between, I think, Nixon and Mao Zedong, but they were left alone. They were completely untouched.
This is not true.
Where?
This is ahistoric.
Explain.
Why do you think Mao had the policies he had? That's because previously, before Mao even came in, China was being interfered with. Like that's why yes, it was.
It was,
and we even see this in China relations.
Give me an example.
Since 1940, yes, between 1949 and 1971. When Mao was still in charge, the United States conducted, I'll give you the direct list. The United States conducted offshore line military alliances through their eastern and southern border. They allied with Japan, South Korea, and the national government of the ROC in Taiwan. The United States formed the Southeast Asian Treaty Organization. Right? They like this
none
is
of
all
this
involved.
Is intervening. No, none of that is interfering with that.
All of that is interference. What are you talking about?
They were free to do as they saw fit. They were largely left alone by the United States.
No, these were all attempts to disrupt and destabilize China and weaken China. All of them.
The reason why Mao Zedong even got as far as he did was because the United States completely ignored him.
No,
he killed millions and millions of people, and he tried to bolster his own power by pushing off resources that the Chinese people desperately needed for countries that were much more better off, like Norway.
Yeah, no, so this you're just being ahistoric right now.
That's not ahistoric. I have a book for it. It's called Mao.
I gave you the direct examples of the U.S. interfering. The U.S. also consistently pushed its allies not to engage in diplomatic relations with China. Consistently.
That's not true.
That is, yes, it is.
Where are you getting that?
This is from asia.columbia.edu. It's U.S.-China relations since 1949.
Post it in side chat. I'll take a look at it.
Sure, but this idea that China had not had interference from the U.S. is not true. It's not. I don't know why you keep saying that it is.
I don't believe you.
Sure. Okay, great. I'll post it in the side chat.
We are about the half time mark.
But even regardless of of China or whatever, there are other countries that were also left alone. But that's irrelevant.
Which ones? No, it's not. It's very relevant. It is incredibly relevant. If the point that
I'm trying to bring to you is that when we look at the math, when we look at everything as they are in terms of quality of life and how it works, like honestly, tell me, Jovan, would you rather live in Cuba or the United States right now? Let me ask you that.
Would I rather? I mean, I'd rather live in a country that has not been decimated by a 70-year-long embargo.
Okay, fair enough. Right? Do you think?
But again, you're leaving out context when you ask these questions.
I'll grant you that yes, the United States did destroy Cuba by creating the embargo, but at the same time, you have to understand that when you have like the problem with the Cuban Missile Crisis, why the hell would we trade with that country when like the very existence of the United States is threatened?
The only reason the existence of the United States was threatened was because the United States occupied Cuba from 1898 to 1950. What was it? 3?
No, it was threatened because the United States put nuclear bombs next to Russia. That's why.
because Russia allied with Cuba because Cuba was occupied by us, right? Again, we keep leaving out a lot of context, but all of this is you said.
But I can acknowledge all of that.
Hold on,
everything that I say makes sense.
But right now, you're just moved. The goalpost has moved so far. Your initial claim was, why would we try socialism when it's always failed, even in cases of non-interference? And then I show you that even in these cases of non-interference, there was interference, and you go, well, none of that actually matters. Here's what actually matters, right? Like, if we're gonna talk about interference of these countries, we have to talk about the fact that the only one you've given was China. I've given clear examples of U.S. even had military operations going on right along China to try to influence China. But you name me another country that was not interfered with via capitalism.
That's bullshit.
I gave you the source.
Let's take a look here.
The United States constructed an offshore line of military alliances along China's eastern and southern borders. These included the U.S. alliances with Japan, South Korea, and the national government of the ROC.
I did not know that. I did not know this part. Okay, that's fine. Fair. Fine. I can concede to the point, and I won't use that as an argument. I'm still not convinced that socialism is the move. Because I'm still stuck. I'm still stuck.
It's only been interfered with. How do we know?
I mean, there are countries where it was not interfered and it still sucked ass.
Which ones?
It's awful. And hell, I mean, like, even if you look at like the most powerful one, which would have been the USSR, it's a fucking nightmare in the USSR. It was awful. Have you seen the grocery stores? Like, or there was like a video of one of the grocery stores in the early 1980s of what a grocery store looked like in Russia. There was also even like, I think it was like a great war, a war general that came from USSR to the United States and looked at the selection that was available to us. And they said, if the Russians knew what kind of selection Americans have, there would have been a revolution the next day. I don't even think you understand just the level of privilege that we're at.
Hold on. You're arguing about the selection. During the 80s, the USSR was eating the exact same caloric intake as the US, and they had a higher nutritional diet than the US.
Yeah, they can choose between the shit meat and like the shit pasta versus like us, where we can choose from Gouda, Swiss. We can choose anything, man.
Hold on, Amender. It was higher. They were eating the same amount of calories, and they had a more nutritious diet than us. Via our own nutrition metrics, they were eating more nutritional than us. This came out of a direct CIA report from January 8th, 1983. Like directly, the CIA said they are eating. So this idea that they were all yes, there was the famine, right?
People
the famine,
are going to be fatter when there's more selection.
I don't deny that there was a famine, right? But if they're eating the same amount, I'm not talking about fatter. It was the same amount of calories. They were eating a more nutritious diet. I can even give you the exact metrics that they marked, that the CIA marked on this. So this idea that they were all starving in the USSR is quite literally
I didn't make the argument that they're starving. I never made that argument, by the way.
I'm sorry. Repeat what your argument was about food. That's right.
I was saying that their selection is fucking awful. It looked like shit. Have you seen what it looks like?
Matter if they're eating and it's more nutritious?
I want to pick a different type of cheese. I want to pick a different type of bread. I want to be able to have do I want a BLT today or do I want a chicken salad? Do I want to have a Caesar salad or do I want... Dude, do you understand that you get one fucking choice? It sucks. People hate it. Why do you think people leave Cuba to go to the United States? It fucking sucks. That's why. It sucks. The selection sucks.
I'm going to disagree with this in a couple. I'm going to disagree with this in a couple facets, right? I don't really care about selection.
Cubans have you met?
I don't care about selection when we have a bunch of people who don't have food.
What?
They're food insecure. I would so much rather they be given food.
Wait, do you think food insecure means they have no food?
Food, it depends on what metric you're looking at, but food insecurity means that they don't have as much access to healthy,
nutritious foods.
Yes, this is an issue.
I agree with you. That is an issue, but you sat there and said that they're going hungry, but the reality is they're not.
There is global hunger because global hunger
I agree with you. Global hunger is a thing, but I'm talking about the United States.
Okay.
And you said that we're food insecure. The United States is food insecure, and I'm telling you that doesn't mean they're hungry.
They are still hungry. If we're looking at like U.S. hunger, right? Hunger still affects millions of people in the U.S.
So are you aware of SNAP benefits?
I am aware of SNAP benefits. They don't
okay.
work.
They don't work?
No, I would argue
It's
SNAP
one of the
benefits
most
do not go.
successful, one of the most successful government programs ever. And you're telling me
Yeah,
it
I would
doesn't
argue-
work?
Yeah, if you would let me.
What are you talking
if you
about?
would
It
let me-
feeds millions of people.
Amender. You gotta let me finish the sentence because I'm like in the way of explaining as I'm talking.
Go ahead.
Right? When I say SNAP benefits don't work, what I'm saying is they are not comprehensive enough to accurately give it to everybody who needs it. That's what I'm saying. Even though we have the resources to feed everybody in the US, SNAP benefits do not go far enough in provide. I've been on SNAP before. I've literally lived on SNAP. And I'm going to say SNAP
that's
is not this
fine.
amazing.
We can then
SNAP
have
is
that
not this
discussion
amazing,
about
perfect.
Then we can have the discussion as to like improving SNAP, but you don't want to improve SNAP. You want to destroy the entire system and build it from the ground up. When I'm like, hey, let's improve SNAP.
Yeah,
what?
I feel like this is a heavy ignoring of what I'm like actually saying. Right? I'm saying that right now in the world, hunger is an issue. Right now, currently.
Yeah,
now you can say, well, sure, let's only talk about the US. But I mentioned at the beginning of my opening
you talked about food insecurity, so I put you back into the US. So go ahead and continue.
Yeah, I mentioned at the beginning of my statement that like I don't just look at it from a US metric. I look at it from a global metric when I'm looking at all of these things. Right? I'm looking globally at how does capitalism affect a country. Now, the US may be doing better than most countries when it comes to global hunger. The US may be doing so much better, right? But the only reason the US is able to do better is because of the theft of resources. Like we're right back here. The only way the US has been able to maintain is the theft of resources. And I show you evidence of I show you evidence.
They're richer now.
What are you talking? We've
richer
already
now.
gone through this, Amender. They're richer because they're outputting more. They're outputting 40% more. I don't know why we have to be back here.
Hold on. First of all, it doesn't matter if you're making $1 million a day. If I stole your car, you still lost. You still lost out.
I can't. Is this for real?
Yes.
We've already discussed that the reason why these countries in the global south are doing better is because they are being forced to produce more, so they're getting a little bit back for the production. But they are being forced.
It's a mutual thing.
I'm sorry. Do you think it's mutual? You think it's mutual in the Congo? You think the Congo is mutual?
No.
You think Haiti is mutual?
No.
Okay, so then so then to blanket statement that it's a mutual beneficial relationship is incorrect.
Most of the time it is mutual.
Name me the countries where it's mutual.
Chile.
How many people had to die for Chile to get to the mutual level?
Huh? What do you mean how many people had to die to get to the mutual? I don't know. Like, are you referring to like Allende or whatever? I don't know. 40,000. Sure.
More died under Pinochet than Allende.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so what do we do? You're claiming that Chile has this mutual beneficial relationship.
Yeah, it does. We trade in copper and lithium and all sorts of stuff, and people's lives are better as a result.
The only way they got there is by doing the exact thing that you claim that I want to do. Was Allende democratically elected?
Yes, Allende was democratically elected.
Right. Was there a coup to oust Allende in which thousands of people then proceeded to die under the Pinochet?
Yes.
Okay. So the only reason they got to the point where they're at now is because of a capitalist coup.
Yeah, and people's lives are currently better as a result. Like the quality of life in Chile is a hell of a lot better. Is a hell of a lot better than ever before.
So you do believe that
it's one of the highest quality living societies in South America right now.
Yeah. So you believe that it's okay that some freedoms get limited, like such as your freedom to live, as long as the outcomes are better. You do believe this?
No, because like what you're referring to ends up resulting in worse outcomes more often than not.
Based on what metric?
What? Lives? Like quality of living?
Yeah, based on what we've already gone through this and I've brought to you socialist countries that have a higher quality of life.
I guess if you wanted to break it down, it would be a thing that I refer to as internal values.
Internal values such as what?
An internal value is basically a thing. If I could do this thing, it would make me more satisfied.
It's just a freedom argument.
But you've already having the ability to do the thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but you've already admitted not only
people's lives are better in Chile as a result.
because other people's lives were destroyed or their freedom was limited. Pinochet jailed how many political dissidents?
I don't
did he
agree
jail?
with any of that. Like, obviously, I wouldn't agree with any of that. But like,
But
you could also have like, but here's the problem, right? When you have a society that says we're going to divest the ownership of the means of production and make it so it's now the workers, and that we already had investments in Chile and companies had investments in Chile. Now all of a sudden it's like, okay, now we don't know where these investments are going to go. We basically have to pack up. We have to pack up and we have to leave. That means there's less trade. When there's less trade, that means life gets worse. Nobody wins under this socialism model. Everyone loses, including the worker.
Again, we can literally point to direct before we do this. I want to point out that your main contention, what your main contention has been that the taking of people's thing or the limiting of resources the limiting of freedoms is a bad thing. So by saying, hey, we need to limit the freedom of investors and just take their means of production is a bad thing. But you don't view it as a bad thing when it comes from the capitalists. You don't view it as a bad thing when those freedoms are limited. Yes, it is, because because
if there was like a giant corporation,
I just let you talk. You gotta let me talk. I just let you talk. You gotta let me talk. I just let you talk. So we literally laid out that when it comes to Chile, right, you are okay with what Pinochet did because it led to more prosperous outcomes. So the ends justified the means, right?
Wait, you're arguing the ends justify the means as well.
Yes, but you're saying that they don't, and I'm showing you that you also believe that it's okay to do this thing as long as the ends justify the means. So to argue against me and say, "Hey, well, I don't think this is okay because I think it's going to lead to X, Y, and Z,"
you're misconstruing my argument. You're saying that like I'm arguing this ends justify the means. I'm not arguing in favor of Pinochet. I'm saying making a society socialist makes the outcomes far, far, far worse. It's not an end justifies the means. That is the reality. What?
When they are affected by capitalism.
So in order for your society to work, let me be clear, right? You have to have a majority of the societies be socialist?
Most likely, yeah.
Okay, that's quixotic. I think you need to like spend more time reading. Like I think you need to like look at other countries that have you ever exited the United States before?
Yes.
So then what is this argument? Why would you even make this argument? This is
just an ad hom, right?
It's not
to say,
an
well,
ad-hom.
your argument doesn't hold up because you haven't left the US? Yes, that is an ad hom.
No, not at all.
It's not addressing my argument. That's addressing the fact that I haven't left the US, so obviously I can't know what I'm talking about.
I'm saying that you need to... What you need to do is that I think that you need to look at society in the way that it is currently formed, right? And then come up with realistic ways to actually make the world better. When you're sitting there arguing this level of quixoticism, it makes the world a worse place, especially in the fact if the fact is that a majority of the countries are capitalist, right? Let's assume that like they're doing all the bad stuff that you're saying, that, just assume that that's the case. Well, guess what? By making your country socialist, all of a sudden these countries will stop trading with you. Do you know why? Because all of a sudden you just divested the ownership of the means of production to be the workers, which now means that all investment goes down the tubes. International trade suffers. Did you have avocado for winter before?
I don't eat avocados.
Really?
Yeah, I don't like them.
Okay. Well, so I like avocado. I like avocados in winter, and there's only one way that you get an avocado in winter.
I just want to point out, you're again saying, well, this would fail because all these capitalist metrics would fail. We know the capitalist metrics would fail. We don't want the capitalist metrics to prosper. I've said again, a company is only as useful as its...
The socialist system is what fails, not the capitalist system. Because what happens is that when you make
out a socialist system that has failed without capitalist interference, you haven't been able to do it. I asked you to provide me a socialist country that has failed without capitalist interference, and you have not been able to provide that. Every socialist country has been interfered with by the US. Well, maybe I won't say the US, by capitalism. Every socialist country, every single one.
I mean, like if you're saying that, let's say that you have a country, let me ask you this, like what metric are you at? Like, let's say like that there was no intervention, but let's say that they were trading with them before. And then because they are now socialist, they just like leave because they're like, I don't want to trade with a country that is just going to like expropriate the products that we put into the factory or something. So we're just going to leave. Is that intervention?
just like stopping trade? No, but embargo.
Yeah, like I'm just going to choose. Okay, fair enough. All right, so hold on.
While we give it that second for Amender to pull up what he wants, make sure to submit your questions, tag at MDD stage questions, and make sure to point out who your question is for. At the end of the timer, we're going to go into a Q&A, and we will have both of the debaters answer those questions.
Tito's Yugoslavia pursued a unique brand of socialism known as Titoism, which was aimed at creating a system distinct from both Soviet-style communism and Western capitalism. While Yugoslavia received some support from the Soviet Union initially, Tito eventually distanced the country from the Soviet influence, leading to the Tito-Stalin split in 1948. Following the split, Yugoslavia pursued its own path of socialist development, maintaining political independence and a policy of non-alignment during the Cold War. Despite facing international challenges from economic difficulties, Yugoslavia remained largely free from direct external intervention throughout the 20th century until its breakup in the early 1990s. Do you want to live in Yugoslavia?
Do I want to live in Yugoslavia? Why not?
That sounds fucking awful. Look at your house.
Why?
Look at your air conditioning. Look at your refrigerator. Look at the fact that you have that there's insulation in your roof. Look at the fact that you have drywall. Look at the fact that you have carpet. Look at the fact that you have running water. These are not granted in Yugoslavia.
Yeah,
the quality of living is much worse in Yugoslavia.
Yeah, Yugoslavia doesn't exist anymore right now, so I don't know.
That's fair. I'm saying that back then, the quality of living in Yugoslavia would have been horrendous. Yeah, it's a fucking shit country. Yes.
Yeah,
correct.
But are you claiming Are you claiming Yugoslavia was separate of what's the word I'm looking for? Was separate of attacks from capitalism? You claiming there was no capitalist interference in Yugoslavia?
Under your metric, then, that would mean that there cannot possibly be a failure condition. I have provided you the exact failure condition by your own metrics, and you are now moving the goalpost saying, well, if there was a country that traded with one country and then that was a socialist country and the United States blocked trade with that country, therefore Yugoslavia would have gotten affected, we're now in a completely different realm.
The blocking of trade is not the only thing that led to the dissolution of Yugoslavia. They also had interpersonal conflicts between capitalists and communists.
Yes, I'm aware. Sure. But you asked for a country that was largely left alone, and that's an example.
I asked for a country that socialism failed without capitalist interference.
That is literally without capitalist interference. What are you talking about?
Yes, it is. No, it is not. The interpersonal conflicts and the wars are started via capitalist versus communists. That's still interference.
Trade. You made an argument regarding trade barriers.
No, you asked me for a condition I had about trade. I didn't make an argument for trade barrier. You asked me a condition. Trade is not the only way that capitalism interferes with socialism, because the USSR was interfered via shock therapy, and I would not call shock therapy trade. Right? So trade is not the only way that capitalism can influence a socialist system.
I mean, hold on. I'm very much in favor of making modifications to the capitalist system and have you can have state systems mixed with capitalist systems. That's what I argue. I argue a logical proceeding, not some quixotic idealism. So I'm saying that you're arguing from a quixotic idealism, and I don't think that the metrics actually show in your favor. Socialist countries are far worse off, and that also includes ones that were completely left alone, like Yugoslavia.
Again, when we're looking at quality of life, again, I can bring up the Cuba metrics. Cuba has a higher life expectancy than
That's fine. Yes, I agree. We have some lessons to learn from Cuba.
Let me finish. They have more doctors per capita. They have a lower infant mortality, and they have 100% literacy, all while being economically decimated by the U.S. They've still been able to accomplish this.
I actually looked up why we have the higher infant mortality. You're not going to believe the reason. It's fucking crazy. It actually turns out it's very similar to that of the U.S. The only difference why the U.S. is higher is because the mothers like to sometimes have the baby sleep in the same bed and not put them in a crib. And as a result, because a lot of us are fat, we end up crushing the babies overnight. I'm not even kidding. That's unironically the reason why the infant mortality is higher in the United States. It's very sad.
I don't know that. The WHO says that the number one cause for infant death in the U.S. is premature birth. So I don't know. What source? Do you have a source for that?
Yeah.
Not because I don't believe you, but because I'd like to actually see that.
Yeah, sure.
See the source on that one.
If
it's going to be because of fat people, if it's going to be because of fat people, I'll just say that the USSR is looking pretty good right now since they had a more nutritious diet. If less fat people means less babies dying, thank you for proving my point.
You got me, Rose. So, like, I guess, like, I'm asking you, like, the thing is when I look at the current capitalist system, I agree with you. I don't like the idea of intervention. But if the existence of socialism is to literally consume the bourgeoisie, then why would the capitalist nations not strive to protect themselves and deny trade with these countries? Like, why would they not do everything in their power to stop them?
Well, they have, and oftentimes it doesn't work. How many times did the U.S. try to assassinate Cuba guy? I don't agree. I don't agree with the CIA. I think the CIA bad. I think what the CIA has been doing, even now, is very bad. I don't like their foreign intervention. I think it makes the United States look terrible. There, are you happy? Does that mean therefore socialism? No, absolutely not. Well, again, my point made at the beginning is I believe that
you're not even arguing socialism.
Always lead.
You're arguing removing the ownership of the means of production to the point that you do want the classless, moneyless, stateless society. What is money for?
Yes, I told.
What is money for?
Money is just an what's the word I'm looking for? It's just a middleman for trade. It's just a middleman. It's replaced bartering. So we went to like a common currency as opposed to you give me fish, I give you water, or you give me fish, I give you goats.
So do you think that, like, let's say if that there was the classless, moneyless, stateless society, do you think that bartering would still exist?
Between persons, yeah, it might be where like barter? you have. Well, it might be you have tomatoes, and I ask you for some tomatoes because I just need a little bit more tomatoes. I don't want tomatoes. I want potatoes. Hold on. You asked me for examples. If I'm going to give an example, you can't say, well, I don't like your example. Use this example. No. Right?
I'm saying that, like, I'm trying to elucidate the reason why we have money.
Yes, I believe the reason we have money is so that we can have class.
No. The reason why we have money. No. Jesus fuck.
Yeah.
The reason why we have money is liquidity. That's very important. So what happens is that when you have a barter, let's say, for example, that you have tomatoes and I have cigarettes and I want tomatoes and they want cigarettes, this trade happens. But for example, if I want potatoes, but all you have is tomatoes, well, then I can't give you my cigarettes. The trade doesn't happen and therefore quality of life get worse. We use money as an intermediary source to be able to have a liquid resource to then get the thing that we want. So we do a thing, we trade a thing. I have tomatoes, and rather than having potatoes, I can sell that for money, and then in return, wait, I was explaining.
Yeah, but you interrupted me trying to answer your question.
Let's hold off on the meta. We just have a minute and 50 seconds, so answer the question, Jovan.
Yeah, so currently we have advanced enough in human society where we don't need money. We just straight up don't need it. We have enough resources and infrastructure to provide people's basic needs to them. We do. The idea that we don't is
wait, I agree with that, but that doesn't mean get rid of money.
What do we need?
We don't need different concept. What?
We don't need.
I literally explained to you how liquidity works. That's the reason why we have money. It's not to establish class.
That's in a system.
One at a time, please.
That's in a system that uses money as a trade method. But we don't need to use money as a trade method because we won't have the need for. Yes, I
asked you if there was bartering. That's trade.
Again, bartering would happen on like an interpersonal level, like me bartering with you in your backyard. Yes, but bartering wouldn't happen on the higher global scale. We would just have a planned economy in which we know that we need this from here, this from here, this from here, and by taking all of these, we can now provide everybody with everything. That's it. We just have it planned out. We just planned the economy out. Right? We keep going into these capitalist metrics.
But I asked you if there exists bartering. You said yes.
And on the interpersonal level, yes.
Okay, but then that means there's trade. And so the problem of liquidity is still an issue now. And because your society results in less trade, life gets worse. That's basic. That's Econ 101. Okay, let's say, for example, I have country A versus. Let's say, for example, I have country A, country B.
almost at the end, so I think it's a good stopping point. Right now, it has been a good debate. We might have to do a part 2 to continue expanding on the topics that were brought up today. But now we're going to go into the Q&A section of the debate, and let me pull up the questions. Right, timer. This is right. First question. The Wandering Jew. Oh, and the way we're going to do this is for if no one is specified, I'm going to ask both of you the question. Just pick one of you at random and let you both answer. If the question is addressed for someone specifically, that person will get a first word, the other one can chime in, and the person who the question was addressed to will get the last word. Right? So first question from the Wandering Jew to Jovan. If I want to work harder to gain a higher quality... Sorry, someone talked and it moved. If I want to work harder to gain a higher quality of living or to gain more possessions that I desire, what would I do under socialism?
Either make them or find someone that does make them and exchange something with them for the thing, or you get together with like a group of people and make the thing you want. I'm not really worried about like luxury items.
Right, Amender?
You have money and then you give that money to somebody because money is liquid. Money has value. And like, so we use that thing to be able to exchange mediums, whereas like normally you wouldn't necessarily have what you need to trade or what the person needs. You have a medium of exchange, so that way you can get the thing that you want after you sold the thing. This is like basic econ. Like this was discovered like in the 1500s. I'm astonished that like that Jovan has this argument because he's actually very smart.
My argument that I don't care about luxury items?
No.
All right. Any last words for the question itself, Jovan?
Yeah, I'm more focused on providing everybody who's hungry food and everybody who is dealing with thirst, water, and everybody who's dealing with the elements, homes. I'm not so much worried about like, will I have a PS5 or not? Like, will I have like you'll be given the things you need. I'm very concerned about the
food over PS5.
You'll be given the things you need to survive, and anything else that you want past that, get together with somebody that makes it. Or we probably will still make it. We'll probably still see that there's a need for entertainment under a socialist system and still make these things. So instead of like some people having a PS5, everybody will have a PS5.
Ain't nobody gonna have a PS5 under socialism anyway. It won't be needed.
Well, entertainment is still a need, so.
Well, I agree, but I don't think you're going to get a PS5.
Maybe you'll get Game Station Socialist Model 75.
Yeah, it'll have 64 megs of RAM.
Next question. To Jovan, how would you combat the economic problem with removing companies and moving to communism in America?
I don't know what they mean by like combat the economic problem. What economic problem? I feel like the question's a bit broad. Like when we're talking about moving away from the system we have now, like if they're asking how we do it, probably revolution or mass worker protests. If they're asking like how do we give the means of production over, it's like I said to Amender during the debate, it probably have to be some form of nationalized system at first, just to recognize the private owner class can't take control, and then it will slowly the plan is for it to dissolve as we move to a system where the basic needs are met.
Except for whatever reason, that never gets to that point. Because when you have power that you give somebody infinite power, which corrupts absolutely. That's what happens every time.
Yeah, because they have to hold on to that power because of.
That's correct. Yes, you created the system that makes that happen. That's correct.
Yes, because they're constantly being interfered with, so they can't give over.
Wait, it's not even a matter of interference. It's literally just how authoritarianism works.
No, it's quite literally a matter of like the USSR, for instance, they had to maintain, even though the USSR had collective leadership. This has been admitted by the CIA, who's like, oh, they have collective leadership, and the CIA literally said they have it, and we're really happy Americans don't think they have it because it's gonna mess us up if they do. But
Yeah.
They couldn't give
if
up
their
the power because they
argument
were
is to
constantly
kill
being
the
interfered with.
bourgeoisie, why would they not try to defend themselves? Why would they not do everything in their power to stop them? Of course they would. Duh.
Okay,
What
hold
is
on.
this argument?
We don't
Ramen
have
gave a
people brutalizing.
clarification.
If you just do nothing. Sorry.
He says, to clarify, I mean on the global scale, like how will that affect the trade economy and stocks will plummet and the dollar backs every currency?
If we're moving to the beginning stages of socialism, not much would change in regards to this, right? Because like you're still going to have a profit model for a little while until you start to dissolve this. But the problem is like how will the stocks will plummet? Okay, we're not going to be using stocks anymore. Like I said, the value a company has will be based on its service to the community. If a company does not service a need in the community, the company gets dissolved. And we redistribute the workers to labor forces elsewhere. That would be my answer to that.
Correct. Thank you very much. Next question from Upogu. So Jovan is essentially advocating that we shouldn't have freedom of choice, and Amender is saying that this is a terrible idea in relation to the invisible hand argument. And
I'm
this
sorry, say that
question is for both. Upogu says,
Invisible
so
hand isn't
Jovan
an
is
argument, it's a
essentially
concept.
advocating that we shouldn't have freedom of choice, and Amender is saying that this is a terrible idea in relation to the invisible hand argument.
I would just argue that freedom of choice is an illusion. You don't actually have freedom of choice because most of the things that you buy are owned by the same like 3 companies.
Amender?
Would you be okay with just like eating Wendy's every day?
Probably not, but like
Yeah, I
you
agree.
wouldn't just
I wouldn't like
you
that
wouldn't
either.
just eat the same.
Anyway.
Yeah, but even in the USSR, they didn't just eat the same thing every day.
What?
Like
That's
be
very common.
misrepresentation.
That was very
Where?
common, actually. That was common
No,
in China. That was common in the USSR. That was. Have you seen what Cuban spaghetti looks like? It's literally fucking just pasta with fucking ketchup. They don't even have
Wait.
fucking regular tomato
So,
sauce. It's ketchup. It's a fucking nightmare, bro.
A problem with this argument, Amender, is that half the time the stuff that they consistently ate was because that was the stuff that they were growing. So like China eats a lot of
eating that every
China and
day.
Japan. Hold on. Japan eats rice every day. They always have rice because that's like one of their biggest crops.
I'm
This
aware.
doesn't mean that they've now lost freedom because
No, but they're
eating what
eating
they
that
grow.
every day. You're saying that they're not eating that every day, and you're saying, but they are. They literally
No,
are.
I'm saying the reason that they eat certain things every day, certain things, is because that's the what they produce. But it's not, you still have bread, cheese, and milk, right? You still have bread, cheese, milk, flour. If I want to make pancakes, I'll make pancakes. If I want to have a sandwich today, I'll make a sandwich.
You
So this
understand
idea
things
that you're going
become
to eat
more
every single
efficient
thing is ridiculous.
when the scale gets bigger, right?
What?
Let me
I'm not
clarify.
making that
Upogu
argument.
said, to clarify, who owns the food doesn't change that I can choose between 50 types, even if that's all owned by one guy.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, but you're not.
based.
I disagree that you're choosing between 50 types of things. You're choosing the same thing, just in a slightly different package.
Bro, you're going to sit there and tell me Wendy's is the same as Taco Bell? Bro, come on. Or is KFC like this? Okay,
But again-
KFC is owned by
but again,
PepsiCo. Is
if I
KFC
want
just like Taco
tacos-
Bell? No, is
Hold on,
KFC just
hold
like
on,
Taco Bell?
Amender, this is a straw man.
I'm
of
just
what I'm saying.
asking you, is it?
This is a straw man of what I'm
How's it a
saying.
straw man? You're
Because
saying it's
I'm
like
not-
the same
because
thing.
Again,
It's
because
not.
again, hold on. Yes, you are absolutely straw manning me. If I go to Walmart and I look up ketchup and I go to like, oh, I want ketchup. I need some ketchup. Sure, there are like 50 brands of ketchup on the shelf. They're all the same thing.
Do you have a favorite
It's all
brand?
ketchup. I like Heinz.
All right, yeah, no
I'll
fucking
eat.
shit,
I'll
yeah.
eat whatever ketchup is available. I'm not.
You
gonna,
just happen
I'm
to
not
have
gonna
this
thumb my
favorite
nose-
brand for whatever
I'm not going to
reason?
thumb my
Hold on,
nose down
hold on
at
one
ketchup
second.
because it's a different brand. I'm not going to be like, I'm not going to.
Well, some people do. That's up to them, isn't it?
All right, moving on to the next question. Lucid Ages says, how does the Jovan want to solve the economic calculation problem and knowledge problem? Also, how does he defend the homogeneity of labor?
I don't know what the knowledge problem is. I don't see an issue where we would have where under a socialist system like knowledge would all of a sudden become commodified. Knowledge is already commodified, right? That's why like to a higher education costs so much. So I'd say under a current system, knowledge is like worse because we only grant knowledge to those that have the means to pay for it. past like a basic high school level. What were the other two parts of the question?
And then knowledge problem and the homogeneity of labor.
Homogeneity of labor. What do they mean when they say? Can they clarify what they mean by homogeneity of labor?
Lucid, would you mind please clarifying what you mean by the knowledge problem and the homogeneity of labor, and also calculation problem? But do you have anything, while we wait for Lucid, do you have anything to say, Mender?
I mean, like, what he's asking is like a calculation problem. That's an extremely generalized statement that doesn't even make sense for like, from like an economic standpoint. So like, I don't know what they mean.
Well, so far he has said Marxist theory, but he doesn't.
When one Google search says the economic calculation problem is a criticism of using economic planning as a substitute for market-based allocation of the factors of production. I don't think I don't know if Amender agrees, but I don't think that's a problem. I mean, I think even in a capitalist system,
That's
economic
the invisible
planning,
hand problem, like I was talking about earlier.
Oh yeah, I don't believe the invisible hand.
Okay, we got one
system.
clarification. The knowledge problem is gathering all consumer needs and wants as ones.
Yeah, I think in the age of the internet, we wouldn't have that issue. I think we've reached a point of global communication where we wouldn't have that problem.
All right. Any?
Yeah, I don't have
anything else, Amender?
I don't have anything to say about that question.
Right. The Wandering Jew says to Jovan, my family in the USSR was so broke and couldn't afford food, so they had to resort to turning street cats into soap in order to afford food. Your claims of famine in the USSR being propaganda are disturbing, and yes, they ate almost the same thing every day.
Yeah, so I would just, again, I have a direct source for this. I understand that some people in the USSR face challenges, right? Especially towards the end of the USSR when shock therapy was implemented by the US and like capitalist interference. But in this, like I said, the report from the CIA of January 1983, the average daily caloric intake in the Soviet Union was 3,280 calories. They intook, on average, mostly grain products, 44% grain products and potatoes, 13% sugar, 11% dairy and eggs, 70% fats and oils, and then 8% meat and fish with 7% other products. So like, I understand that some people are going to suffer under any system, right? There are people in the US who have to eat really shitty food because they can't afford better food. But again, a direct report, the average caloric intake was around the same as the US. The US had about 3,520, while the USSR had 3,280.
Amender, anything you would like to add?
Nope.
Right.
I mean, it's like,
next
I'm
question.
sorry, it's just like obvious that it's like I don't even think Jovan would do very well in Russia at all. He's sitting there saying that it would be perfect, and it's like he enjoys the like having all of these choices, and even though that there's only 3 companies, I highly doubt that he would think that like one place is just like another place just because it's owned by the same company. It's ridiculous.
I don't think that addresses the argument I made like at all. It kind of just ignores the argument I made, right? And we're right back to an ad hom. We're saying, well, because you engage in this system, you clearly don't actually agree with your own arguments. Yes, it was. You quite literally just said Jovan wouldn't survive here. That is quite literally an ad hom. It's not addressing.
Well. Yeah, you wouldn't do well.
You didn't address the argument I laid out.
Amender, wow, this sucks.
You didn't address the argument I laid out.
Yeah, you sat there and said that the caloric intake is roughly about the same, and 35 and 3,200 is not the same. But okay, let's assume that like the 3,200, it's like roughly comparable. But like even then, like I highly doubt that any Russian would honestly like pick the Russian diet over like the United States diet. Obviously, duh. Why in the world would they sit there and stick with their rice and beans when they have such a huge selection? I guarantee you every single person in your chat would prefer more selection. I promise you.
Yeah,
the only reason why you would argue less selection is because you already have the more selection. You don't know what it's like without it.
Yeah, so again, the bulk of people in the USSR wanted to maintain the USSR. So they didn't want to leave the system. They wanted to stay in the system. So this idea that the bulk of them wanted to get out is also not true, because when we did the 1991 referendum and they voted on the maintaining the USSR, it was an 80% voter turnout, and 70% of them wanted to stay in the USSR, of all USSR countries. So I don't know what this idea is that like most people in the USSR would want to get out of, would hate or hated this system and don't want to be in this system anymore.
Yeah, why the fuck do you think?
All right,
many people
moving
agree?
on to
No,
the
it's
next
fine.
question, because we have quite a few of them. This one doesn't say to whom, but Lithium Dev says, how can we prevent abuses of power in the over-centralized government style of socialism? I'm going to give Amender the first turn for this one.
What? That would be Jovan's argument. I don't argue for a huge centralization
you're
of
right.
government.
I'm sorry.
I argue for
Yes.
argue for a private model with like social safety nets, which is completely congruent with modern society.
Yes. It slipped my mind. Sorry. So, Jovan, go ahead. How can we prevent the abuses of power in the over-centralized government style of socialism?
How would we prevent the abuses of power? We just have to give enough. We have to everything has to be solely democratic, right? So everybody needs to have like a vote, and we have to give enough. We have to give enough ways for people who are in power to be taken back out of power. Like I would argue that there needs to be like plenty of recall votes, or even once a year, or maybe even once a quarter votes on whether or not the people in the seats of power are doing a good job. We need to give a lot. It needs to be a lot easier to remove people that are in political office. But I don't.
Right.
This would also be a problem of capitalism that we currently have. So it might be a problem under socialism, but it currently exists as a problem now.
All right. Lithium Dev, again, for Jovan, is your definition of capitalism when the government does stuff?
No, I gave my definition of capitalism at the beginning. It would be a system, an economic system where the means of production and exchange are privately owned.
Why is that question even a fucking thing? Like, what? Like, we both defined
Maybe
it.
he
and
came
even
in
agreed.
late. Don't be mean to the audience.
Sorry.
Maybe he came in late.
Sorry.
It's fair
Don't add
enough.
on the
Don't-
audience, Amender.
It's fine. It's fair.
For Jovan, what's your ideal form of socialism?
I mean, my ideal form of socialism would be a short-lived socialism, right? I primarily want to use it as an interim to get to council communism. But like, if I'm like, I'd probably actually just say council socialism, right? I would just take the tenets of council communism and put them into a socialist system.
All right. Opogu, and this one might apply for both of you. Either you trade in gold, or you trade in goats, or you trade in a consistent currency. I think this goes back to what you were talking about before, money and trade. But let Amender chime in here, and then I'll get you
Sorry, can you repeat
your
the
2
question?
cents from you, Jovan.
Could you repeat the question?
That felt like a statement, not a question.
Well, yeah, but let's try to frame it into a question that either you trade in gold, or you trade in goats, or you trade in a consistent currency. How could we make like no money work?
It would just be to abolish class, right? The abolition of money would abolish the class distinctions between low income, high income. Like that would be the part of the reason for abolishing money.
So class extinctions
All right,
would still
fair enough.
exist even with no money, because somebody would. There is a necessity to having like something that's liquid, that's tradable. So if it's not money, it's probably going to be something else. I mean, in prisons, it's cigarettes. So whoever has the most cigarettes is affected. So like, what are we going to arrest all the people who have more cigarettes? Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
Well, no, because the basic needs of people would be met, so you wouldn't have anything to hold liquid over people, right?
People
you
aren't
couldn't
necessarily in favor of only just having the bare minimum. They want more.
Amender,
They always want more.
Amender, you gotta let me finish. So, for instance, you wouldn't be able to hold housing over somebody's head because they have housing. You wouldn't be able to hold food over somebody's head because they have food. Now you can, if you want to say like somebody's got all the, if we want to use this as an example, someone's got 100 PS5s, so they're making people do stuff for PS5s. But I would just argue that the community would get together and make a PS5.
What?
Because there wouldn't be, because the necessary means of production to own the PS5s aren't owned by one person.
You can't,
or aren't owned by one entity.
You literally can't make a PS5. The amount of R&D required to do that is insane.
We already have done the R&D.
What?
So
no, you didn't.
Sony did. The R&D.
Hold on. Upogu gives us a little bit of clarification. Say if you have something I want, let's say every household gets 10 tomatoes, but you dislike tomatoes and I love tomatoes. So I want your tomatoes and you want my peas.
I wouldn't take peas from you. I would just say to the people that deliver the food, hey, I don't really like tomatoes. They'd be like, okay, we'll give your tomatoes to a household that likes them. We'll give you the thing. We'll give you your tomatoes to somebody else. You don't like tomatoes, it's just going to go to waste. We're not going to let the food go to waste.
Right, fair enough. Next question from Lithium Dev for Jovan. If you want to send a few questions over for Amender, that would be cool too, because most of them have been for Jovan so far. I understand that it's something...
I'm the op, bro.
No, because you argue for quixotic nonsense. That's why everyone's like, what? Why? And then they go, man, I got to ask this guy a question because it makes no sense.
You keep saying quixotic,
so
but
Lithium
I
Dev
clearly laid out my positions.
For
Yeah,
Jovan, money... For Jovan, money is the... And this is a quote. Money is the jealous god of Israel, in face of which no other god may exist, unquote, Karl Marx on the Jewish question. I don't... What's the question, Lithium Dev? Does he agree with that, or...?
No, I wouldn't agree with the anti-Semitism, no. But I think that people can like create something and still be shitty people. And like we can still use the thing they created.
Next question. From Lucid Ages to Jovan. To what extent do you agree with this? And this is also a quote. The Jewish N. LaSalle, who I'm glad to say is leaving at the end of this week, has happily lost another 5,000 tailors in ill-judged speculation. The chap would sooner throw money down the drain than lend it to a friend, even though his interest and capital were guaranteed. It's now quite plain to me, as the shape of his head and the way his hair grows also testify that he's descended from the N who accompanied Moses' flight from Egypt, unless his mother, paternal grandmother, interbred. What does the N mean here?
I don't understand what this. I do not understand what this is. I'm not touching
now
this.
this blend
I'm not
of
touching this with a 20-foot pole, bro. I got an online persona to maintain.
Could you try to make this very long question? Could you try to make it more succinct and also add a question to it, because it doesn't. It just seems a quote. It was very weird. I'm sorry. It was long. I would have been a few moments of silence for me to screen it before. Yep. Klexi, to 1stAmender, what are the best and worst outcomes or results of capitalism? Vice versa to Jovan.
Probably one of the best that I would say is just like having the plenty. Like we took like human greed and basically turned it into something that actually outputs to something that people want, which is really, really cool. As far as the worst, there's rampant abuse, and that there are people that legitimately suffer. And I think that there are ways to repair this. I just don't think like communism is the answer.
All right. Jovan?
Am I being asked about capitalism?
No, for socialism, what are the best and worst outcomes?
The best outcome is everybody's basic needs are met. People have food, water, homes, and they don't have to deal with the elements or starvation or anything like that.
Norway, and it's capitalist. Sorry.
Okay. As I was answering the question, the worst outcomes for socialism would be like authoritarianism, but this would also be the worst outcome for capitalism as well.
All right, and the worst?
I just said the worst. Authoritarianism.
Oh, sorry. Perfect. Thank you so much. Right. Next question. Splical. First Amender, don't you think that the idea of everyone having food is more important than being able to choose which food you have?
Oh, bro, wait. I agree. That's why I argue for food stamps. Why do you think, like, I argue for SNAP benefits? You know who wants to get rid of SNAP benefits? It's fucking Republicans. I mean, obviously he's not a Republican, but like, this is like operating at like at a very realistic level. Whereas like, I don't know, I just think like getting rid of everything and like starting like fresh is just kind of silly.
All right. Anything you would like to add, Jovan?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I think food stamps are not cohesive enough. As somebody who's been on them, I understand that's slightly anecdotal, but as someone who's been on them and somebody who looks at the numbers, like the qualifier numbers for getting on food stamps, I don't think they're expansive enough. And I think that we have enough food, right? America has 14 billion pounds of food waste every year. I think we have enough food.
Goes bad. And we have to get things from point A to point
B.
That's
a large portion of the food waste is not bad food. So I think large food waste also counts all the food that like grocery stores pour bleach on when they throw them away.
Why do you think they do that?
Yes, why do I think they pour bleach on
why do
perfectly
they do that?
good food? You know that food that's thrown out, even if it's past the expiration date, oftentimes it's not bad, right?
You understand that that's a giant liability concern?
Yes, so we make it so that they.
So like, yeah, you make it so they basically can't. Yeah, I do agree with you that like we should be giving like food to food shelters. Yes, I agree, but also I think expired food can be extremely dangerous, and so you need to. And so one thing that they end up doing is so that way they prevent people from like digging into the trash and taking the food and basically causing a lawsuit on their hands. Is they put bleach on the food so that way people don't take it. That's why
expiration dates are overinflated.
What?
Like we found this constant. Yes, yeah. Hold on. We found this constant times where companies will put a earlier expiration date, even though the product is still good. Well past that, they'll put an earlier expiration date so that that product has to get thrown out, and the grocery store has to buy more of it.
You don't know that. It depends on the product.
What?
Yes, you don't know that. It depends on the product. There could be a product where that is happening. There could be a product where that's not happening. You're talking about millions and millions of products.
Yeah, I think it's clear that like meat and stuff, like frozen stuff, we're probably not going to do this as the same way we do like non-perishable goods, right? Like that would be the nuance in here. But I didn't want to spend 30 minutes.
Do you know what we donate all the time? We donate non-perishable goods.
But
we throw away the stuff that goes bad, like veggies, fruits.
Charities and donations have not been able to couple the food food like hunger. They have not been able to couple hunger.
I agree. Wait, so then expand food stamps, expand SNAP. Don't fucking rip apart the entire system.
We won't need food stamps and SNAPs if everyone's just given food.
So what do you think SNAP is?
You know what? Hold on. Wait, I really want to quickly. I want to agree with Amender. I believe we should expand food stamps and SNAP, and the way we do that is by just giving everybody food. So everybody gets a SNAP card. When you scan that SNAP card, you're given all the food you need for the week. That's how I would expand it.
All right, next question. Explical again. Question for Jovan. You say that we don't need money because we can fulfill everyone's basic needs like housing and food. How are you going to get people to get those basic needs without money? And if you say bartering, at that point, just use a form of currency.
I don't think we need to do bartering. I think it's the classic Marx tenet from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. So when you work, so like somebody might say, hey, you go help build houses today. And then you're given all the stuff you need, right? You do for the community you're given. And I think we have pretty clear examples of all human society, thousands of years of human society, pre-capitalism, where people just did things, even pre-barter societies, right? Where people have like this need, like basic human psychology. They have this need to form communities. And I think we see pretty oftentimes like people who do volunteer work, people who work after they retire when they don't need to. Like people not only have a drive to help, but they have a drive to be doing something. So I think that's how we'll fulfill those. We don't necessarily need to pay people. We just say, you work, here's your food.
Jovan, are you in favor of churches?
Am I in favor of churches?
Yeah.
What do you mean? In favor of them? How? I don't care that they exist. Yeah, I don't care.
Well, I mean, they do what you're saying.
Some of them, yeah.
So are you in favor of that?
Yeah, I don't mind churches.
Okay,
I don't
fair
care
enough.
one way or another.
Fair enough. Okay, I was just curious.
All right. Next question. Watch my legs. Sorry, it's a cool screen name. To both, if socialism doesn't work, then why do capitalist countries spend billions to make sure countries that try it fail at it?
Because it is a security problem with the United States. Yes, when your argument is to literally physically eat the bourgeoisie, yeah, I think it makes sense to stop you. Yeah. I look at it no different as you're coming into my house with a gun. Like, you can fuck right off. Like, no, I'm not going to engage in a trade with you. I'm literally going to stop you. Yes, that's exactly how that works.
I want to first respond to the question. It's because capitalists are afraid of not, or rich people are afraid of not being rich anymore. But second of all, the idea that like people are going to eat the bourgeoisie is just not true. We want to fold the bourgeoisie into the proletariat class. So when Marx talks about a dictatorship of the proletariat, it's that every class distinctions would be dissolved and everybody would be a part of the same class. Not that we would just like go on this mass unaliving spree of the bourgeoisie. But the reason why in a lot of countries you see, or I wouldn't even say a lot, the reason why you see this argument of like eat the rich or something is because the rich won't give up their money and wealth willingly. If the rich class, if the 1% goes, oh yeah, we'll gladly fold into the proletariat, then there will be no violence. There will be no issues.
Jovan, do you believe that you are the 1%?
No. Because
I got news for you,
I don't own any means of production. I work
I got
for
news
a living.
for you, pal. You are the 1%. Globally, you are the 1%. I just want to let you know that. You are the bourgeoisie.
I would disagree.
Mathematically, you are the 1%.
I would disagree.
Okay.
All right. Next question from Xerxes. Question for Amender. What are a few other socialist countries besides few...
Wait, really quickly, MX, can I just respond to that last little bit? I would gladly just by the way, I'd gladly give up my money if we were going to move to that system. I would do it easily, gladly. Like, let's go. If the system is changing, let's go. Let's do it.
I think
Right.
I think when you could never mind. It's fine. Let's go to the next question. There's a lot of questions. It's fine.
From Xerxes. What are a few socialist countries besides Yugoslavia that haven't experienced foreign intervention?
I would have to look up some more. I mean, I'll be honest, like, yeah, most countries have been intervened by the United States and other capitalist nations. So I'll give Jovan that, but I still don't think socialism is the solution.
All right. Next question from Lithium Dev. For Jovan, is the Holodomor capitalist propaganda according to you?
The Holodomor? No, that would be a genocide.
That was run by state
All right.
capitalists.
There's capitalist genocides, and there have been genocides of like state socialist countries. Like genocide isn't specific.
Wait,
to
are you
the
actually
economic
calling
system.
the USSR socialist?
What I call the USSR socialist? Yeah, they were socialists.
Thank you. I make fun of so many
Next
socialists.
question.
Sorry, go ahead.
From the Wandering Jew, if the caloric intake between America and the USSR was so similar, then how come 8.7 million people starved in the USSR and nothing like that happened in America? Seems like your caloric intake argument doesn't make much sense.
I made a very big distinction in my caloric intake argument that it was around the 80s. The famine that killed millions of USSR citizens was in the 30s.
All right.
So it was a later time. It was after the famine.
Yes, that's
All
correct.
right. Ramen asks, Jovan, using votes in Russia is not evidence the sentiment was you die otherwise. Please add some punctuation to your questions. Otherwise, also counter. Why was the Berlin Wall built to stop people from leaving if it was so great?
Well, wasn't the Berlin Wall in
In Germany.
Germany? What would that have to do with the USSR?
Berlin was both socialist and capitalist, whereas the East Side was basically
No,
owned by
sure.
the USSR.
Sure. When I discuss the voting in the USSR, I talk about the referendum on the preservation of the USSR, because if we're going to talk about like doing what people want, people wanted to remain in the USSR. Like I said, it was 80% voter turnout. You can disagree with this, but the referendum exists. The referendum was a legitimate vote held in 1991. 80% voter turnout. 76% voted in favor of maintaining the USSR. Then I'm providing you a direct source of people wanting to stay in the USSR.
There were millions of people that went to the United States how do you think we got Ayn Rand? There's so many people that were like, dude, this shit is awful. Get me the fuck out of here. Get me the fuck over to the United States. Why do you think they built a fucking wall to stop them from leaving?
This isn't addressing the issue. The claim that I'm making is that of the 80% of people that turned out to vote, 80% voter turnout, sorry. So of the 80% voter turnout means of all the people that could vote, 80% of them showed up. 76% of them wanted to maintain the USSR. Argue against that point. People can leave, sure. People leave the US. This doesn't mean that the majority of people don't want to maintain the US.
You killed all the detractors. Well, they killed all the detractors.
We do that here too.
Here we have a little clearing up of the question, because Berlin was socialist and part of USSR. Also, again, most people thought that they would be killed if they voted otherwise.
What?
Putin has most people voting him, sure.
So Berlin was split. So I don't deny that there was locations within the Soviet zone, right? But when we're talking about like the preservation, this happened in 91, right? This happened towards the end. Like, where was if the voting was compelled, right? Why did the USSR dissolve? If the voting was compelled, if we're saying that people were compelled enough to vote, but they weren't compelled enough to be able to maintain, like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
now, if you're talking about a country, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I was gonna say it seems weird to be like the voting was compelled, yet the thing that they compelled the votes to do didn't happen.
Please, for those of you requesting to speak on stage, this is a scheduled debate. So for now, we're not opening the stage for the rest of the audience. Next question from the Wandering Jew. For 1stAmender, what form of capitalism do you think is best for America? Also, opinions on Henry Clay and the American system.
Yeah, I'm a social democrat. I do argue that like we should have social safety nets. I do agree that like that there's more that we could be doing. I think that we can look at like hell. I think we can even look at Cuba in terms of like the way that they deal with their medicine. You know, I think we could look at and come up with like America-centric approaches that would actually work within the United States. I mean, I'm pretty sure like even Canada, that when it came to like healthcare, they like basically they still appeased the insurance companies by basing it off of provinces, and then like the insurance companies still benefited while at the same time people could just get their healthcare. And it's like a system like that would be super beneficial to the United States, and it would actually cost us less, not more, because we currently spend more per person in the United States on healthcare than if we just like got rid of that and then had like a decent system like they do in Canada and other countries. So like I just argue like, yeah, let's just have like a realistic society that has empirical metrics of actually working, not this like idealistic nonsense.
Anything you would like to chime in, Jovan?
Yeah, I don't disagree with this. My whole stance is that capitalism will always lead to crony capitalism. It'll always lead to corporatism, where corporations get to sort of dictate. And if corporations find that it's better to provide some social safety nets so people don't interfere with them making billions of dollars, like I think they will do this, right? But again, I believe that capitalism is like inherently exploitative. So it's just I'm like solely against the exploitation of labor. So yeah, but I don't disagree with the Mender that like we should have universal healthcare, things like that.
We have 6 questions or 5 questions left. American, to Jovan, how does this help in the successful growth? Come on.
Just skip it.
American,
Just skip
In
it.
the successful growth of the breast milk industry, it's a joke question. You don't have to answer.
No. I think it's important that I answer this. I think it's very important.
It's American. It's not.
A
Trust me.
better diet leads to better breast milk. So
Oh, American, he got you your answer. That's pretty awesome. He understood the joke immediately. Wire asks, would Marx be a Zionist?
he was Jewish, so maybe, I don't know. I actually would have to read the Jewish question.
Yeah,
which
he
was
didn't like Jews.
his well, he was Jewish.
No,
When he
but
wrote
he
the
didn't
Jewish
like
question, he
Jews.
was I don't know that I would agree with this sentiment, because when he wrote the Jewish question, he was like responding to another thing. I just have to reread the Jewish question.
Okay.
All right. Next one, Ramen. Jovan, why not use social nets to make sure everyone has basic needs and then give the ability to work for a better life rather than bring everyone down to the food stamp level?
Because I believe that this idea that everyone will be able to have a better life doesn't address the fact that you'll still be exploited for your labor, right? You wouldn't need the government to subsidize, like under capitalism, you wouldn't need the government to subsidize stuff if our labor wasn't undervalued, right? If our labor wasn't undervalued and the cost of living didn't go up and shrinkflation wasn't a thing and regular inflation wasn't a thing, you wouldn't need the government to subsidize this, but it kind of has to because of the failures of capitalism, because the whole point of capitalism is to earn as much profit as possible, and the best and easiest way to do that is to devalue labor. So at the end of the day, I still, even if capitalism was providing some of the basic needs for some of the people, I don't believe capitalism will ever make it expansive. It doesn't address the devaluation of labor problem.
All right. Any thoughts, Amender?
Nope.
All right. Elysian, for both of you. Alternately, during the Cold War, the USSR exceeded Western technology, Sputnik, and lagged behind, creating a fake IBM called Riyadh. Given this mixed data, which system is better for technological innovation and why? And let's start with Amender.
Both. The answer is both. When it comes to private corporations, they have a vested interest in making money, so they're going to do everything that they can to try to make some motherfucking money. And I think that sometimes that results in innovations. However, sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes the profit incentive needs to be removed in order to really establish a person's R&D and creativity. And so having the government step in there is a really good idea. I really like the government focusing on R&D and innovations. And I also like the idea of companies doing that.
All right. Jovan, any thoughts?
I would argue that under capitalism, we actually see kind of worse when it comes to technological advances and things like that. While we have seen a major boom in the internet era and things like that, I do think that this would have happened either way, because most people who made computing advancements did it in a garage, and they didn't do it because they wanted to make money. They did it because they like computers. I think one of the issues we see with capitalism is we see patent holding companies where people will invent something, sure, and then a company will buy up the patent and not allow the patent to be sold, or not allow the patent to be made, or the item that is in the patent to be made, because it directly competes with something they have in the market, and it would make their thing obsolete, right? So I would just say that under capitalism, we see a stifling of innovation and of technological advancements.
Yeah, guys, the reason why Bill Gates started Microsoft was because he liked computers. He's a multi-billionaire.
The reason he worked on.
He started in a garage.
That's a straw man of my argument. I didn't say the reason he started the company, but
he did start the company.
Hold on, Amender. What I'm saying is, when you look at people who make advancements, half the time they're not doing it because they're making. Bill Gates hadn't been making money.
Bill Gates absolutely did it because he wanted to make money.
Hold on. I disagree. He
what?
did it because he liked computing. It's the same with Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs didn't set out to become a billion.
Doesn't he have a net worth of $150 billion or something?
Again, you're addressing the end point of their company with what I'm talking about, which is the start point of their
company. But you don't get that way without wanting money.
I hold on. You can absolutely begin a company just because you like doing the thing that you like doing. But
I agree, but I'm saying to become a billionaire, you need to want money.
Hold on. What I would argue, right? What I would argue is that the most of the time when we look at like people who are willing to do a butt ton of work, look at the modding community in video games. I have gotten more value off of somebody who spent hundreds of unpaid hour modding Fallout 4 than I've ever gotten over the broken mess it was when Bethesda dropped it. Right? People will do things just because they like it.
I agree.
We
but
see
that's
this all
not
the
how
time.
macro economies work. Like there's more than just that. People want to make money and they'll make it selfishly. And yes, that does result in people like living a better outcome, like making something that's worthwhile. Yes, that happens sometimes. I can't believe you don't see that.
Again, my claim is that capitalism stifles this.
Disagree.
How many iPhones have we had in the last like 10 years?
Like, I don't know, like 10?
How many advancements have there been made in iPhone technology since the iPhone like 9? We got what, a third camera?
No, you got
there has
AI
not been a lot.
models. You got like better touchscreen
didn't invent
qualities.
AI.
You've got better
Apple didn't
screens.
invent AI.
You've got IPS. You've got OLED. What are you talking about?
Apple didn't
What?
invent OLED. Apple didn't
It doesn't
invent
matter
OLED.
if they didn't invent OLED. You're asking
Yes,
what
it does.
innovations did they have, and I'm like, yeah, they had a lot of innovations. What?
If you're gonna sit
of
here-
course
if you're
it
gonna sit here and
innovated.
claim-
And also,
if
you're
you're gonna sit
bringing
here
up the
and claim-
iPhone, but there's lots of things that have been improved in the last 10 years entirely on the basis of profit. Like what?
Yeah, if you're gonna
What is the
claim- if you're
AI?
gonna
What is the
claim-
AI movement? Is
Homie,
this not
homie,
profit?
do I get
I'm sorry.
half the people who do AI training are not making money for it.
What?
You have bigger companies that are like ChatGPT and stuff, but do you know how many people AI train models to do random things when they are not getting paid for it? Because people
Yeah,
like
that's
to
the
do
training
this sort of
part.
stuff.
What about the designing part? They're sitting there making money off of it. What are you talking about?
Again, people will design really expensive computer programs just because they want to do it.
I agree, but also profit.
What?
Also profit.
DaVinci Resolve.
Like
DaVinci
what?
Resolve is DaVinci Resolve is a way better program than Premiere Pro, and it's completely free. Like, what do you mean?
I agree with you, but also people do it for profit.
I'm not saying they
Right.
don't.
Then why are you arguing that they don't? You
I feel like
literally
you never
did.
Moving
listen.
on.
Oh my God.
Amender,
Moving
why
on.
don't you ever
Come
listen
on.
to my
Simmer-
actual
simmer down.
claims?
Simmer down. Moving on to the next question. Ask Amender how many people capitalism has starved or killed. And then he answers the question, but I'll give you the answer afterwards. So
Millions. The answer
what's
is
your
millions.
answer, Amender?
It's millions. The answer is millions.
yes, he says that the answer
Capitalism
is
killed-
over 1 billion.
Yeah, that's a lot of people. Yes. It turns out when you're a giant system that, yes, it affects a lot of people. And sometimes that results in bad things happening. And yes, I agree. Those are bad things and we should do things to stop it. That doesn't mean capitalism bad. Just like I can't use the same argument against Jovan in the fact that like they lacked food.
All right. Next question, and we just have two more. Basescu Boss, to both. Do you consider that Skibidi Toilet is a product of capitalism, or Skibidi Toilet's existence is deeper and based on class struggle? I don't
Skibidi
know
Toilet
what that
would
is.
exist. Skibidi Toilet would exist without capitalism. Skibidi Toilet transcends all economic systems.
What is that?
It's a
You don't wanna know.
Gary's mod thing where they have a head that is coming out of a toilet where they go skibbity up skibbity up the re, and that's it. That's it. That's all it is. I just gave you the whole thing. Are you happy? Are you happy that you now know everything
okay.
about skibbity toilet? All right.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much. And let me. Last question. American question for Jovan. What's the incentive to brainstorm and invent new things without reward under communism or socialism?
I would argue most major innovations are bred from laziness. Let me rephrase, are from people wanting to make work easier. So we would still innovate because nobody invented the wheel because they wanted to make a bunch of money. The wheel was invented to make moving things easier. I would just say most innovations would come from our desire to make work easier.
All right. Anything you would like to chime in on this question, Amender?
Nope.
All right. So thank you everyone for joining the debate. Thank you, Jovan. Thank you, Amender. I'm going to give you 1 minute for your closing remarks. And if you want to take a little bit of that time to make sure that you let people know where they can find you, where they can, where your social networks, where you stream, etc. Make sure to also do that. Let me do this. 1 minute on the clock, and who started?
That's
Amender
50.
started the debate, right? So let's start now with Jovan, and Amender will go last.
Sure.
1 minute. There we go.
Yeah, so I believe, as I've been saying multiple times, I think that capitalism is an inherently flawed means of an economic system. Like I said, I argue that socialism would fix these inequities. And I think I showed pretty well that there hasn't been a true attempt at socialism without interference. If you want to see more of my stuff, my YouTube is Jovan M. Bradley. Every other thing, my Instagram, my TikTok, my Twitch is Jovan_Bradley. I have a Patreon that you get exclusive debate content on. We're running the gambit, so come join us if you are a leftist and you like leftist content. Me and Amender agree on a lot of stuff, so a lot of stuff he debates I also debate. So if you like some of Amender's takes, other than we just disagree on economic systems, but almost everything else we pretty much agree on.
We agree on trans rights, bro. Trans rights.
True,
Let's
true,
go.
true.
We are pro-trans over here. Hell yeah.
By the way, I'm interrupting the last 5 seconds of your outro.
Sorry.
Because you interrupted the last 5 seconds of mine.
Sorry.
Nope, it's too late. I'm doing it.
All right, yes, sir.
All right. Let me reset the timer. Amender, 1 minute for you. Go ahead.
My family comes from Chile, and we lived through Salvador Allende. It was fucking awful. We went to the United States, and it was fucking rough. It was hard. You know, capitalism's tough, and sometimes capitalism, people need more help getting a leg up. I argue that people should be able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and I think that there's just basic social safety nets that can be applied that allow people the ability to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. If the entire bottom rung of the ladder can get basically a little bit higher, so that way people just start off at a higher spot. I don't care if there's a bunch of billionaires in that case. I just want the system itself to be easier to climb up, and I just don't want to take down the entire system, because I've seen what systems look like when they're taken down, and it's fucking awful. And I think Jovan is mistaken.
Rah rah, cheetah girls, rah rah.
All right. So this has been a debate on Modern Day Debates Discord. We are a neutral platform holding debates on politics, religion, science, and pretty much all topics that you can imagine. We have crossed the boundary of 5,500 users. So you can find pretty much anyone to debate at any time. We have users from all over the world. My name is Max. I'm a moderator here, and you can also find me on YouTube at Matters Now. And I recently made an X account. It's my nickname, MXXXD_DJ. So if you're interested, give me a follow. Thank you both, gentlemen, for the debate. It was very interesting. Thank you, the audience, for the questions. We will close the stage now, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thank you very much, and have a